Talk about the easiest way to clean a semi-automatic handgun. And we'll get into a lot more here in a second, but I think the first thing we should talk about is, the basics of gun safety and field stripping. And this is pretty much the same across the board. I think pretty much anyone who's owned a gun for a while pretty much has this memorized, but basically treat every gun as if it's loaded. Always have your gun pointed in a safe direction away from people. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire it. Don't put anything in front of the muzzle that you're not willing to destroy. And always be sure of your target and what's beyond it. It's interesting because when you start getting into guns, you start realizing you have to violate these rules sometimes. For example, this is a Glock 19. Take the mag out. I got some dummy rounds in it, but you want to take the mag out, empty the chamber, lock it open. I do this all the time, especially when I was new to guns for the first couple of years. I always put my pinky in here just to triple check it, double check it that it's actually empty. Because the last thing I'd want to do is just eyeball it and I, for some reason, overlook it and they're still around in the chamber. But one of the rules you got to violate is, well, we got to pull this trigger in order to take this gun apart to clean it. So in order to violate that rule, we're going to point the muzzle down. If I destroy my desk, whatever, that's totally replaceable. The main thing is you want to make sure you're not pointing it at a wall where somebody might be sitting on the other side of that wall, or up at the ceiling. Like if you live in a 2-story house and you're on the bottom floor, you don't want to be pointing it at the ceiling and stuff. So just be cognitive of that, but you got to pull the trigger. When you're cleaning your gun, you're doing what's called a field strip, which all you're going to do, with a Glock, for example, you're just going to pull it back a little bit on the slide while you're pulling down right up here. Let it go just like that. It's pretty simple. But every gun is kind of the same when it comes to semi-auto. There's just different ways of taking them apart. But a field strip is taking the slide off, pull your spring out, pull your barrel out. Every gun is different. There are guns that are very different than these. As an example, this one would be a little bit different because of the way you take it apart, but I'm not going to go through how you take this one apart because most beginners or new people to firearms aren't going to buy this gun. Maybe you did as your first gun, but I've never met anyone that bought this as their first gun. But if you bought a CZ-P10C, it's going to disassemble just like the Glock. Most other guns are going to disassemble just like this one, where you have to pull this back, pull this down, and then pull the trigger to let it go. That's how most semi-auto polymer guns are going to disassemble. So that's the field stripping part. This gun's pretty clean. I think I cleaned it not too long ago. Now, you might see a lot of stuff regarding this, and some people will complicate the crap out of it and you won't know which way to go. And then some people probably don't take enough care in cleaning their guns. One thing's for sure, if this was real ammunition in this mag right here, make sure you take that way away from you, about at least 6 feet away from you, because ammunition has a way of finding its way back into guns. Like I was saying, a lot of people can overcomplicate this, and I try to keep it as simple as possible because I got a lot of guns to clean and I don't feel like cleaning them all the time. So I just try to make the process as simple as possible. Let's go over some of the tools you're gonna need. It's not very complicated. It's just basically 2 pieces of cleaning equipment, microfiber towel, and then cleaning solution, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then you're also going to want to get some nitrile gloves. Doesn't matter if they're black. So all of this, if you follow the first link in the description, it'll take you to a separate page where all the links are located. But that's how we support the channel, because YouTube doesn't allow us to be monetized anymore. So if you click my links and purchase anything, it doesn't even have to be the parts that I link to. They'll give us a small percentage, and that's what keeps firearms channels basically running nowadays. So, get my nitrile gloves. Main reason you're gonna want this is twofold. Number one is lead. When you start cleaning out these barrels and stuff after you've been shooting them, they're gonna have a lot of lead built up in them, and you don't wanna get lead poisoning. The main way you're gonna get lead poisoning is touching it to your fingers, and then touching your mouth, your eyes, or your nose, and then the lead's gonna absorb through your mucous membranes. You don't want that. I have been told by some people that lead will absorb through your fingers. That is not true. The particulate size is a little bit too large. All you gotta do is go to the MSDS website. That is the Safety and Precautions for All Hazardous Materials. And it'll tell you that unless it's organic lead, which we don't have in guns, it's not gonna absorb through your skin, but it will absorb through like your mucous membranes, that like the inside of your mouth type stuff. So keep that in mind. So you don't want to get lead poisoning, that's for sure. So you get your gloves. Now let's talk about the tools. Now everybody has a different way of doing it, and most ways that you clean a gun are correct. There are some wrong things you shouldn't do, but mainly, you might watch somebody else's video and you're like, wow, they do it completely different. Well, that doesn't mean that I'm doing it wrong, and it doesn't mean that they're doing it wrong. It just means we do it differently. The way I do it is I get some kind of bore snake. This one is called the bore snake. Right here, it's got this brass bristles in here. and that's going to clean your gun. That's going to help you clean your barrel. This one over here is called the Otis Ripcord. I like this one as well, and this one doesn't have the bristles. Now, I've heard complaints on both sides of the camp on this. Some people say that the brass bristles are too aggressive for the inside of your barrel, and I've heard other people say that the Otis Ripcord isn't aggressive enough. So when in doubt, you can get both. They're not that expensive. I think they're about $8 to $10 each, and they are caliber specific, so I'll make sure to put links for multiple different calibers at the build list, so that'll be there for you. This thing I really enjoy. So prior to having this brush, I had a brass bristled brush, which is fine. Brass bristles, nothing wrong with that. It's not going to really hurt anything, but this is plastic, and I have had this for 2 years, and it has not worn out. I think I paid $6 for this. Best $6 I spent. This is gonna be a big benefit. Then you're just gonna wanna get a microfiber towel. And that's all I'm using for tools. Now let's kind of talk about some of our cleaning and lubrication products. The most popular one you're probably gonna hear about is called a CLP. Cleaner, lubricant, and preservative. Basically, it's an all-in-one system. You shake it up, you spray your stuff down, then you clean it. And that's it. Then you just go back to shooting your gun. I used to love this stuff, but typically with this kind of stuff, you're gonna get really strong odors. It is very, very toxic. It even says it right here. Harmful or fatal if swallowed. Now, it didn't bother me until I started getting headaches from using it. And then I switched to more organic / biodegradable stuff. Right now, my favorite system is Shooter Lube. It's a 2-stage system. So you got cleaner. This is gonna clean your gun. Then when you're done cleaning it, you put your oil on it. The oil's gonna protect it and keep it running good. I do have, I don't remember if it's 5 or 10% off promo code, but I've been using this stuff for 3 years now. And I ain't had no issues with it. I'm not gonna say it's the best because I haven't tried everything, but it works good and I don't have any rust on my guns. Another alternative is Simple Green and motor oil. Straight up, like this is non-toxic, biodegradable and everything. Like this is probably gonna be the cheapest option right here. And then go get you some motor oil and you could use that as your lubrication and protectant. But I'll make sure to include links for all this stuff if you want to pick it up. But essentially, got our gun field stripped. We're gonna lay out our little microfiber right here, just as our little surface. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the cleaner, the solvent, I'm gonna spray this bad boy down. I'm gonna spray the whole thing. I'm not even gonna worry about it. Inside and outside. Set that to the side. Now the cool thing about this stuff is you can spray it anywhere you want. You can spray it on your frame, you can spray it in your slide. It's not gonna hurt anything because it evaporates pretty quickly. So if you were to spray it like into your firing pin area, it's not gonna hurt it. While I'm letting that soak, I'm just gonna wipe this bad boy down. The cool thing is because it's non-toxic and it's organic, it's not gonna harm the finish of your gun. So that's always something people talk about. They always worry like, oh, if I buy this product, I've heard that it can remove the finish off the gun. This stuff, it just doesn't. And it has zero odor to it. So like I was talking about with the CLP, it would give me a headache. There's zero odor. There's not a good odor, there's not a bad odor. There's just zero, which is perfect for me. On a field strip and clean, I'm gonna go through here in a second and talk about a deep clean as well, but at first we're just gonna go over this field strip clean. And this is the clean you're gonna be doing most often. Depending on what kind of gun you have and depending on how dirty your ammo is gonna determine how often you should clean your gun. You know, back in the old days when I only had like 1 or 2 guns, I would clean them after every range day. And now I barely clean my guns at all. I just always forget because I got so much stuff to do and I got so many guns. I would say for your carry gun, if this is gonna be your self-defense gun and it's not just like a range toy, I would say clean it after every range trip. That's what somebody told me and I think that's good advice. So now that our barrel's been sitting for a minute, we're gonna take it, we're gonna wipe it off on the outside and we're gonna get all that carbon off of it. There shouldn't be too much. Then we're gonna take this little bore snake here. I'm gonna use this one right here and I'm gonna spray right here on top of these bristles some cleaner. We're gonna take this little fella right here, feed it in, and we're just gonna pull it through. Voila. Typically, you don't need that many passes. I usually do 2 or 3. It's usually gonna clean it up, especially if you keep your guns clean and you don't let them get caked up with carbon, you're gonna be fine. Just clean them after every range trip. You only gotta run that thing like once or twice and you're good to go. Another thing you wanna look at is your chamber. If you notice at the top of this chamber, I got a lot of carbon buildup up there. So the way I'm gonna take care of that, spray some more of this on it. I'm gonna take this little brush right here, I got this little small side, and I'm gonna use that to scrape off the carbon. And this usually works really well. I hope I don't eat my words today, but I also like to get this feed ramp right here. Over time, this feed ramp will become permanently discolored and you won't be able to remove it all. You just want to get all in these little nooks and crannies, make sure you get all the carbon out. There shouldn't be a ton, but you just want to be sure. All right, cool. So after this step, you're ready to oil your gun and put it back together. But like I mentioned, we're going to talk about a deep clean here in a second. But first, let me show you how that works, putting it back together and oiling it. With a Glock or most semi-automatic pistols, you're not going to use a ton of oil. You can use more oil, but I typically run my gun semi-dry. And what I mean by that is I don't use a lot of oil. So according to the Glock specifications, you're going to want a little bit right here. You're going to want a little bit kind of along this. I really like these little needles, these needle applicators, because it allows you not to put too much on the gun. Then I just kind of spread it out with my finger. Put a little bit of a bead across the top. And then I definitely want to get a little bit right here on this ledge of the hood of our barrel, because that's where it's going to get a lot of friction when it's locking and unlocking. Then on the bottom here where these lugs are, I put a little bit of oil down in there. Not a lot at all. I'm just going to put it back together. And we're good to go. That's it. It's really the easiest way to clean a semi-automatic handgun. And like I mentioned, if you keep your gun clean, it's super easy to maintain. It's when you let your gun get incredibly dirty that you're really gonna have some problems cleaning it up, getting the carbon off. Now, in regards to the deep clean, same thing as the filled strip, right? We're gonna take that out, put that out, except we're gonna take the gun completely apart. For this, I like to start on the slide. Now, for a Glock, you're gonna stick a little punch right here. See that little plastic piece down in there? You're gonna stick a punch in like this, pull down, and as that's pulled down, you're gonna push this back. I don't usually do it at this angle, but that thing wants to fly out. Thankfully it didn't. That's your back plate, you're gonna set that here. This is your firing pin right here. It's all captured together. And then this is our extractor and our safety plunger. To get the extractor out, you just simply press your plunger here, turn it to the side, and then we release that slowly, and there's a little bitty spring right there for you to see. Now, if you're using a CLP type cleaner or you're using oil, you never want to get any oil down into here or down into here or in here. If you get oil or any CLP down in there, it's going to cause your gun to malfunction. And as you can see, the way that I cleaned that out, you're going to get carbon buildup obviously over time. But the way I cleaned it out is with Q-tips. Some people say not to, but I've never had an issue with it. I just do go in there just to make sure there's no oil residues down in there. That's it for the slide. So now we can put that back together. That's not too shabby, huh? We're gonna take our safety plunger. Sometimes that spring will fall out, sometimes it won't, but we're simply just gonna place it back in. And then we're gonna put pressure on it. We're gonna take this little fella right here, call it our extractor. That little round part goes into that little round hole, just like this. Now we can release it and it'll be captured. Then we just put this firing pin straight in. We're gonna take our extractor plunger, metal side goes in, plastic side sticks out. Then we can get this little guy started, our back plate. We're gonna use our punch here to depress. Then we're gonna just, the frame looks more intimidating than it really is. And I'll show you what I mean. I remember the first time I got a gun, I was like really perplexed at a lot of this stuff. And now I just look at it like, oh, that's it. So if you have a Glock, specifically a Gen 5, this one's a Gen 5. If you have a Gen 3 or 4, there's gonna be 2 pins right here. But Gen 5, there's only 1 pin here, 1 pin here. You're just gonna wiggle this little guy. This is our slide, stop, slide release. And when you wiggle it, that allows you to get this pin out. Then we're gonna push this back pin out, and I'm gonna show you why we're cleaning this. Now, I do a frame cleaning probably every 3 or 4 range trips. You don't really have to do it as often, but you'll see why I'm doing this right now, actually. It's really carboned up. You can see this trigger. It shouldn't be that dingy. It should be a little bit shinier than that. Also, if you look down into the frame, because it's flat dark earth and not black, you can see all this carbon buildup on the frame down in here like that. So we're gonna get all that out. And we're simply just gonna spray that down. And then I'm gonna use microfiber to get everything cleaned out. And look, you can see how quickly the carbon's being removed from the frame. To get those little corners, I use my punch and my microfiber, and I just kind of stick it down in there, and then that comes out. Not too bad, really. We're gonna make sure we get all the cleaning solvent, out of here. We want it to be dry before we put it back together. Now, one thing I don't like about this, and I don't know if this has occurred to other people that have this, but if your handgun frame is black, it sometimes leaves like a white residue if you don't dry it off fast enough. So for example, if I spray this frame down and I forget to dry it off and I let it sit, it will create a white residue on the outside. It's not gonna hurt anything, it's just it can be kind of annoying and ugly. So keep that in mind if you have this stuff. Make sure you wipe it off as soon as you spray it on. The main parts I'm gonna be cleaning down in here is our slide lock slide release. You can see a ton of carbon buildup right there. That's a ton. So I'm gonna spray that guy down, soak it down. It's not a huge deal, but since I got it apart, we're gonna clean our locking block. The way you take a Gen 5 trigger apart, you pull forward, you twist it, and it comes right out. And the way I'm gonna do this, I'm just gonna spray this guy down, let that sit. Now you're gonna notice some white stuff on my trigger connector back here, and that's because I have a little secret ingredient that I use to make my trigger smoother, which I'll show you in a second. You don't really have to take this apart if you don't want to. I'm just gonna wipe it down. There's not really any carbon buildup on it. But on the trigger here, there's a lot of carbon buildup, which shouldn't be too difficult to remove. One thing that should be noted is, I said this will work for almost any semi-automatic handgun. That doesn't count the deep cleaning. What we're doing today, all that's like pretty much only for Glocks. Like every gun has a different way you take it apart. Glocks just tend to be the simplest guns to take apart and put back together, especially for new people, which is why I'm taking it the extra mile and showing you how to deep clean it. So earlier when we did the first one, that was the fastest and easiest way to clean it. And this is the one where you're gonna take your time. Wipe our locking block off. I'd say we're golden. Now, I promised I would show you my secret ingredient for making my triggers, especially in Glocks, be a lot smoother. It's this stuff, white lithium grease, NLGI number 2. I learned about this from Johnny Glocks. He told me about it and I was like, wow, I gotta try that. And I'll put a link down in the description for this. I take a little bit, I put it on my punch right here, and I take my punch and I just rub it on the trigger connector. And then when I put this trigger back together, I'm gonna put just a tad more on the outside. And you're like, why would you put it on the outside? Because the outside of this trigger is gonna rub against the inside of this frame, and I would like it to be as smooth as possible. I press it in, put our slide lock slide release back in, we'll put our locking block back in. Then we're gonna take our pin here, put that pin back in, and we're gonna put this pin back in. I gotta put the slide back together. I forgot I took it apart again. And my triggers are, this is a stock trigger. I think it's pulling at about 4.5 pounds. Not too shabby. And that NLGI white lithium grease makes it so much smoother. In regards to products, like I showed you, I'm only using about 2 cleaning products, some kind of boar snake and this plastic bristle brush, which I will link below. If you have any questions, guys, or if you have any other ideas for other types of videos you'd like to see, just let me know down in the comments, guys. But until next time, I love you. You guys stay sexy.